if you are traveling abroad, prepare for the slight possibility that you could have your devices seized, you could be questioned, and you have no obligation to answer questions without a warrant or a lawyer present. And you have every ability to get a second phone and upload everything to a cloud before you come back, and then sign out of your devices and all your social media programs and prepare to have your devices seized.
You all know our next guest, Max Blumenthal, is an award-winning journalist as well as the editor-in-chief and founder of the independent investigative news website, The Gray Zone. He's also the best-selling author of several books, including Goliath, The 51-Day War, and The Management of Savagery. He's just returning from Iran. So live from the interrogation room at Dulles International Airport, Max Blumenthal. Max, thanks for joining us.
I'm just
you're
returning.
Home. Oh, you made it home. That's great. Well, that's
Oh, wow.
I made it.
Wow. That's crazy. Congratulations. Smooth travel, I assume, this time.
Smoother than returning from vacation. You never know when they're going to get you.
Yeah.
We thought you were calling from CCOT.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, so I figured we better get you on in time. But no, I did want to ask because you just got back from Iran. But the last time you left the country, you wrote an article on your way back. Max Blumenthal, why was I questioned by the feds? You write, as I approached the customs line at Dulles International Airport early on the morning of February 24th, a man called out to me, Mr. Blumenthal. He identified himself as an officer with Customs and Border Protection and led me into a cavernous secondary screening room where he treated me to a strange and disconcerting questioning session. I had just returned from a leisurely trip to Nicaragua with my family, during which I participated in no political activities, but the agent's line of questioning suggested federal authorities had little interest in my visit to Nicaragua, a country that happens to be controlled by a socialist-oriented government on Washington's hit list. As my family and I followed the agent down a long hallway, he turned to me and said, I love this, I caught your latest appearance on Judge Napolitano. He was referring to Andrew Napolitano. That's right. Judge Napolitano runs the garlic not eating contest out in Teaneck, New Jersey. A former Fox jurist who hosts a daily live stream featuring former military and intelligence officials, as well as journalists like me who dissent from official national security narratives. Nearly all my appearances on Napolitano's program, Judging Freedom, have focused on Israel's blood-soaked wars in Gaza, Lebanon, and beyond through the past 16 months. When I asked the agent how he liked my interview with the judge, he shrugged and declined to volunteer an opinion. He later assured you were not in trouble and you were out of there. But were you, I mean, in all seriousness, I mean, we joke, but in all seriousness, does this affect the way you think about international travel, especially to a country like Iran, which is got to be on the shorter hit list than Nicaragua even?
Well, you read the whole article, so I have nothing to add here. We can just move on to the next topic. I was much more prepared on my trip to Iran for my, and you know, when I told any people close to me that I was going to Iran, their main concern wasn't like, oh no, you're going to get turned into a hostage. And, you know, it's going to be like Not Without My Daughter with Sally Field. And like, Iran is scary. Their fear was me returning to the United States. Their fear was our own government.
Right.
And, you know, my fears were not realized, but the FBI has been over the past year approaching numerous people who've been to Iran, journalists and scholars who have been to Iran, and asking them for interviews without a warrant. And, you know, one of them is named Allison Weir, and she's done she runs a group called If Americans Knew, which mobilizes, you know, Palestine activism. And she was approached because she had gone to a conference in Iran several years ago at her home in the Bay Area. I spoke to her about it. She wrote publicly about it, so I can say all this. But I mean, I don't know. They're working on some case. So it's like they can approach you at any time just because you went to this high risk country and try to gather intelligence. But the easiest place for them to gather intelligence is obviously at the border. And so Customs and Border Protection, because you have less rights at the border, you have less rights in an international airport, your constitutional rights are not fully protected. They have set in on some American citizens, an increasing number of American citizens, to gather intelligence. And I guess when I was coming back from Nicaragua, what happened to me was what's called a TREC, TREC, where they just have a traveler recognition alert, and it gets activated, I guess, by some higher up in U.S. state security. And then they assign some agent to interview me. And what he interviewed me about was unexpected, as I said, disconcerting. And I didn't understand how disturbing it was at that point. But he flipped over a sheet where I wrote down just basic information that I had no problem volunteering. And it contained several handwritten names. And I'm pretty sure some of those names were of the students who had visas or green cards that they were preparing to arrest and deport.
Mm-hmm.
One of them, and I couldn't remember them all. I mean, it was 3 a.m. I'd been on a long flight. But another one was Susan Benjamin, which was the birth name of Medea Benjamin. I didn't know her name was Susan. I just think of her as Medea. I've always known her as Medea. She's like, ever since I've known her, she's always been wearing pink. So it's like, this is the co-founder of Code Pink, by the way, one of the most prominent anti-war activists on the planet. So that was someone I guess they're looking at. They wanted me to give information on these people, either that or they just wanted to like deliver a tap on my shoulder and tell me they're watching me. And this was the same procedure that was initiated against Hassan Piker, who is more like in line with the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. And, you know, liberal media freaked out about him being treated to like a 2-hour questioning session. But it was the same thing. He was coming back from France, I guess. He wasn't in a high-risk country. And they still did that to him.
Right.
So anyone watching this, anyone, I think this goes for anyone. If you are traveling abroad, prepare. You know, for the slight possibility that you could have your devices seized, you could be questioned, and you have no obligation to answer questions without a warrant or a lawyer present. And you have every ability to get a second phone and upload everything to a cloud before you come back, and then sign out of your devices and all your social media programs and prepare to have your devices seized. That's something that you should consider doing if you're politically active in any way. And even if you're not, a lot of people, you know, if you have an Arab name, if you have Lebanese heritage, I mean, these raise the risk of you being questioned at the border and having your devices seized. So be prepared. And it's not going to go away after Trump leaves office.
Yeah, we know an activist who was just telling me, I won't say her name, but she was going to get an award in Canada, and she didn't go. She said, "I'm sorry, thank you for the award, but I'm not going because I don't know how I'm going to get back in, if I'm going to be able to get back in." Yeah, it's amazing. It really is.
Yeah, to what you were saying, I've been planning on going to China in the fall. And when I was originally talking about this, the fear was having trouble in China. And the fear has become coming back from China, of all countries, particularly with this administration. So you mentioned, I started doing some research on this after that happened to you, actually. So you didn't have to answer the questions. You still have that much constitutional protection. From what I understand, you don't have to surrender your devices. Things that I've seen recommend definitely disabling the Face ID. Obviously, the best thing is to go with a burner. But is that true? Do you have the right to demand an attorney? And if so, why did you answer questions?
Well, they'll turn the screws on you.
Right.
And
yeah, that's what I figured. Yeah.
You know, as far as the questioning I endured, which was very soft, and I felt like it was like almost like these are throwaway questions just so they wanted to just harass me. And it wasn't even clear to me at the time that it was a Trump era flag. I thought, oh, this could be something left over from the Biden administration, but it was clearly a Trump era flag and a way of harassing me as a media commentator, as the agent indicated. So I was with my wife and kid. It was 3 a.m. and I just thought, I'm going to be as polite as the agent was being very polite. I will be polite and I will cooperate to the extent that I'm comfortable, but I wasn't going to be a snitch. I'm not going to be. He was trying to literally turn me into a federal informant. And, there's not going to be any snitching on activists who are engaged in legal anti-war activity. So I didn't know who those people were on that. And I just kind of looked at him with befuddlement and said, I have no idea what this is. And I started asking him what it was about, and he refused to tell me and really seemed to want to get me out of there. So it was all over. And then I come out and I'm like in the baggage claim area, and there's a guy from, I guess, West Africa who's on a Zamboni like floor cleaning machine. And he just like pulls up to me on the machine and asks me for a selfie. It was very surreal. But it was, I guess he was like a Jimmy Dore fan or something.
Yeah. Well, could that be it? I mean, if they figure you're a commentator of a high enough profile, you must know people, and maybe you know some people who they're looking for.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, I get that everywhere I go, like in other countries too. But, it's not normal to be held in a, held by state security until I, give up information. But I would not do that. As far as surrendering your devices, they offer you the option of, this is what I've heard from other people, of having your data copied right then and there. You open your phone for them, and then they just go into another room for a minute, take all your data, put it in their Big Brother central scrutinizer database, and then they give you your phones back. And then your phone could be fundamentally compromised. The other option is you just give them your phone, but you don't open it, which annoys them, but they just take it. They have 30 days to do whatever they want with your phone. Your phone's compromised. But what they often do, I've heard, is if you refuse to give up your devices, they say, well, okay, we will just temporarily take your passport, which means that you are under house arrest within the borders of the United States. And temporary, well, how long does that last? Like Scott Ritter doesn't have his, as far as I know, I haven't asked him in a while, he doesn't have his passport. He can't leave the United States. So I wouldn't want to accept that scenario. So I think the smartest thing to do is, have a secondary device. What Richard Medhurst, the journalist who is accused of terrorism in Austria for his political commentary and has been raided in the UK, has done to really infuriate the British authorities is he installed something called Graphene OS, which is an operating system that is kind of crowdsourced by privacy experts, and it takes you out of the entire Google system, and the feds, they have no way of cracking into it. And so they can't get into his phone, so they're demanding that he give them the code to his phone or he go to prison. And he's actually working on a book about digital security. But anyone watching this, you can look up Graphene OS. There's a GitHub site that shows you how to install it. You can even ask like ChatGPT or DeepSeek, how do I install Graphene OS on my phone? And it will guide you through it. And it's a pretty intensive process. If you want to go there, you can do it, but this is the world we're living in, and it's an Israeli world. Like, I'm not saying Israel's behind this, but that's the way Israel has always operated, and now it just feels like we're becoming more and more like Israel, and experiencing some of the same phenomena that Israel experiences inside its militarized frontiers because of this relationship. Our government tends to see things the way that they see all citizens with deep suspicion as anyone with a different perspective as a potential terrorist. And they have received lots and lots of training from Israel. Boston's Logan Airport, you guys are up in Massachusetts, right?
No, I'm in New York City.
New
New
York.
York.
So you're in New
yeah.
York.
I'm in the capital region, New York. He's in the city. Yeah.
Okay. For some reason, I always associate Keaton with Massachusetts. I don't know. It's
Oh,
like,
interesting.
I don't know why.
I got
I'm
to
not-
ask
I'm
Abram.
not-
I'll tell you
maybe
about
I'm
that next time we
confusing
have him
the-
on. Why do people look at me and think Massachusetts? Why is that? Why do you think that is?
Anyway, Boston's Logan Airport faced a number of lawsuits from Black travelers primarily. And it turned out that they had hired a guy named Michael Rosen, who was an Israeli security consultant, who was training them in all the techniques of recognizing micro expressions, grabbing people's phones, basically profiling and taking people inside secondary screening for interviews who seemed suspicious. And all the officers through their training were basically told, anyone who wasn't, a white male who looked like he was in business attire is a potential threat. And so they started getting all these anti-discrimination lawsuits and had to change the way they did business and fire this guy. This has been happening at airports across the country. And back in like 2007, during the Bush era, the head of Israel's Shin Bet, Avi Dichter, who is a blood-soaked psychopath, who now actually is an opponent of Netanyahu and his coalition because they're just so genocidal. He spoke alongside James Comey, I believe, at an FBI convention of like all the agents came to Washington and had a convention. And he was the keynote speaker. And he argued that they need to stop taking on crime, and that the real issue was crime-terror, and that it was impossible to distinguish between criminals and terrorists, and that it was all in a gray zone. And so they had to adopt the Israeli way of thinking that all citizens are potential terrorists, even if they've committed, low-level crimes like, money laundering or something.
Right.
And that's the message Israelis have been sending. And so now we're in this world. I mean, it all also has to do with like late-stage empire, that U.S. hegemony is collapsing around us. And so the wars are coming home, and citizens who are not supportive of the current regime, not just the Trump administration, but the current regime, are seen that their danger is heightened in the eyes of this national security state.
What do you think they're trying to do here? Because you're seeing it on both ends where, what's the rationale for locking up some pasty Welsh girl for being part of a work exchange program for a place to stay as they did, locking up an actress from American Pie, which has the effect of people don't want to come in. And then because of things like this, and they've done it to Americans who are not political podcasters, where they're getting questioned at the border. So right now it's anecdotal, but there have been several articles written about Americans not wanting to leave because they're afraid this is going to happen to them. It seems like they're trying to lock us all into this country. To what end? Why are they doing
They are, yeah. That's I used to laugh at people when they would say, "Oh, I oppose the border wall because one day they're going to use it to keep us in." Right? I'd be like, "Oh man, you've been watching. You sound paranoid." Well, I mean, just last week, the State Department supported a measure to videotape Americans as they leave and to install new security, a whole new all-encompassing security apparatus on the U.S.-Mexico border to record Americans when they leave. I think Marco Rubio said something about seeking to prevent like student protesters from self-deporting. So it's happening, along with Palantir's all-encompassing surveillance system that the Trump administration is contracting with. And the way in, the kind of political way in, is immigration. That illegal immigration was extremely unpopular by the end of the Biden era for a variety of reasons. And the Trump administration had full latitude to use immigration as a political device to ramp up mass surveillance and beef up the security state that had been consolidated by 9/11. They haven't really had like some what Paul Wolfowitz called days before 9/11 a catastrophic and catalyzing event yet.
Right.
But immigration is what, they're using to justify this massive contract with Palantir to gather as much information as possible on Americans through all of our social media habits, create profiles on us, and who the hell knows what they're able to do using our social security data and our tax data and so on. But it's all happening under the rubric of immigration. Why are they going after, a Welsh girl, for example, and detaining them? There's so many travelers who are being detained in ICE facilities, who are being subjected to borderline abuse. It's because politically the Trump administration needed to do some shock and awe against foreigners in order to satiate the sadistic desire of their base for revenge for all of these horrible things that undocumented immigrants did, in place of their ability to carry out mass deportations. They're not going to be able to do it.
Exactly.
It's just It's simply impossible. They'd have to take like 40 years of hard ICE deportations, going deep into communities and pulling people out who've been in this country for 20 years but weren't born here, and deporting entire workplaces to get it done. So it's not that's also what the Israel lobby wants. The Israel lobby and the Zionist movement in the United States, they want shock and awe deportations of a few students. It's like in the Middle Ages where they didn't have mass surveillance. They didn't have this all-encompassing security state that So in order to send a message to criminals, they would torture someone in the town square, hang them, quarter them in order to set an example. And that's what the Israel lobby wants to do with students on campuses, to frighten them all. And then they're targeting all international students. The Trump administration's doing that. And they're trying to prevent international students who tend to be, from wealthy families abroad from applying to school in the United States. So the shock and awe effect is meant as a deterrent, and it's left up to the determination of the CBP agent who could be having a bad day or has nativist, racist attitudes and just wants to flex on somebody. And they're just given a free hand now. I mean, Trump said we're going to untie their hands. So they can do whatever they want to you. What I have seen, though, in my own interactions and from people I know is they at least, try to be polite at first.
I mean, that's such a massively important point. I've said this before. None of this is actually about immigration. The immigrants are just the scapegoat they need to build a police state, because you can't build a police state without a scapegoat. And that's what this is. Their numbers on deportations are actually lagging behind Biden's deportation numbers, much less Obama's. It's not about that. It's about building a police state, using that as the political hook. Yeah, that is a super important point.
It's just remarkable. I can't believe they're stupid enough not to understand that this is going to destroy the country. No one's going to come here. Academics won't come here. Students won't come here. Tourists won't come here. Entrepreneurs won't come here. It is going to destroy the country. So what do they think that's going to lead to? Even their own base is not going to be happy with the results of this.
Yeah, I don't think Trump's base sees that as destroying the country. I think they see that as some kind of renewal. They don't tend to, they don't really care if people come here from France or Italy. They don't have much interaction with them. Much of Trump's base was left behind after the financial crash and just isn't tied into into any international exchange or the transatlantic world. It's a lot like the British voters who are voting for the Reform Party of Nigel Farage and don't really care about the Schengen zone. The whole part of the debate around Brexit was that a lot of cosmopolitan younger people in London really valued their ability to travel without a passport inside the Schengen zone. But then you had a whole other mass of people who were more in Northern England, from déclassé, lower middle class, working class backgrounds, who were losing status continuously because of the EU, and Labor was just losing power in general. They tended to be and many of them had voted Labor in the past, they didn't care about traveling to France or going on vacation in Slovakia or whatever. And so they demanded Brexit, and Jeremy Corbyn, who initially was for Brexit, was surrounded by these kind of metropolitan advisors, and he kind of turned tail and he reversed his position and said, we're going to vote. We're going to have another referendum. Let's try it again. And so the red wall, which is where many of those voters who were, in unions that had lost power, who weren't international travelers, who had been Labor over the decades, the red wall collapsed on Labor, and it's never coming back. You saw the same phenomenon in the US. So at least the Rust Belt part of Trump's base, which is very mobilized and dedicated and sees Trump as kind of like a cult figure who transcends the Republican Party. They could care less about the Republicans. They don't see it as destroying the country. And we also have to admit TPS was a disastrous policy, and it was partly motivated. It was a bipartisan policy. Ironically, Marco Rubio was one of its key authors. It was motivated partly by the desire to destroy certain countries in what John Bolton called the troika of tyranny, what I call the troika of resistance in Latin America. Cuba, you have a wet foot, dry foot policy, which has caused a massive brain drain in Cuba. But Nicaragua and Venezuela, what they wanted to do, and they had these characters like Juan Guaido's ambassador here in Washington, Carlos Vecchio, who were also very influential in shaping the TPS policy, pushing for it. What they wanted to do was the Venezuelan and Nicaraguan right-wing expats, they wanted to mimic the Cuban lobby, which was so powerful in South Florida. And so they wanted to fill up their ranks. So they're like, let's destroy those countries by sanctioning the hell out of them because they have socialist-oriented governments. We'll create a migrant wave. And then when the migrants get here, we're going to organize them all and mobilize them all. And I would see Vecchio running around in Miami or in the suburbs of DC or anywhere where there was a Venezuelan diaspora, kind of registering people, getting them to sign sheets so that he could then, it's like creating the biggest mailing list possible, then create a political power base for this parallel government. And so they're the ones to actually blame, but the Trump administration was the one that empowered them and gave them their fake government in the first place, recognized them and sanctioned these countries, as well as, participating in the destruction of Haiti, which got the Democrats all supported TPS on the grounds that Haitians would get it because Haitians do not tend to vote Republican. They tend to support the Democrats. So they're like, we're going to offset all of these anti-communist expats from Nicaragua and Venezuela. And then they come into the cities and there's nowhere for them to live. They can't work. So they're living on the streets, they're selling arepas, they're living in any way possible. Some of them are not the best people. My friends in Caracas have told me, crime has gone down massively here because our entire, and in Nicaragua too, even in like the small towns, people would say, the neighborhood drunk, he went to the US. The neighborhood drug dealer went to the US. They all came in here on this bipartisan policy, and it led to where we are, which is, the Trump administration is trying to end the policy completely, and they're going about it in the most sadistic, despicable way possible, and also taking the opportunity to beef up the security state, and whatever's left of democracy will be in shambles by the time this is over.
Come see us live. Glasgow, Manchester, Belfast, Dublin, London, Liverpool, Birmingham. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets.